Okay, now we're back. So again, welcome to this meeting of Carpinteria Birdwatchers. We are going to be talking about shorebirds in a minute. First, I have a few announcements. One is that I have changed the date of our monthly outing. So I had said it was going to be later because of my travel, but then my travel changed. So now we are meeting on the usual date. We're going out at 8 a.m. this Saturday, September 20th, and we're meeting at the Carpinteria Saltmarsh Nature Park along Ash Avenue. So sort of towards the south end, sort of towards the ocean end of Ash Avenue. The entrance to the marsh there is where we'll meet, and hopefully we'll see some fun shorebirds and other birds. So please come out to that if you're inclined to do that. Another announcement is that on October 7th at 7 p.m. up at the Natural History Museum in Santa Barbara, I will be presenting a talk on photography, bird photography, along with Sophie Cameron, who is also presenting a talk, sort of each doing half of the talk. And so that should be fun. That's again 7 p.m. on October 7th at Santa Barbara Natural History Museum as part of Santa Barbara Audubon's talk series. So I certainly welcome people to come to that. I wanted to share just a little shout out to a fun YouTube video that I mentioned in the last meeting, but maybe you didn't hear about it. And I've now seen the whole thing. It's called Listers, A Glimpse into Extreme Birdwatching. It's a video, like a feature-length video that's free on YouTube. It was created by Quentin and Owen Reiser, and it talks about their birding big year that they did in 2024 as North American big year, as novice birders, and hilarity ensues. It's a very fun video. I highly recommend it. And then on a slightly more serious topic, there is a development proposal at the Carpinteria Salt Marsh, right at the mouth of the salt marsh, where the ocean comes in and out. And that one spot at the marsh, there's a vacant lot, and there is a big home that's been proposed there. The County Planning Commission has approved it, and it has been appealed to the Coastal Commission, and there are people who are opposing that development. It is probably the one spot at the salt marsh with the highest concentration of shorebirds and other migrants. So I'm a supporter of the effort to get them to maybe downsize it or accommodate the birds more than they do in the current plan. There's more information about that at friendsofthecarpinteriasaltmarsh.com. And Nancy Barron had a really nice article that talked about this issue in last week's Coastal View. So Thursday, September 11th, the Coastal View, she had a nice piece there. So I encourage people to check that out. And links to all of these things are at the webpage at carpbirdwatchers.org about this meeting. And I think that is it for announcements. So, and because I want to talk about shorebirds, I'm just going to zip right on into the shorebird part of the talk. Those of you on Zoom, we are kind of locked down these days. We don't have everybody have the ability to share their video because of a few bad actors in the past. But you're welcome to use the chat. You should be able to use the chat. Tom Beland and Laura Luby, who are back in town, which I was going to mention how grateful I am for that, because I am very grateful for that. They will be monitoring the chat, or Tom will be monitoring the chat. And if you have input during the meeting, you're welcome to share it via Tom, and he can share it in the room if I don't see it in the chat. So with that, let's go ahead and do our shorebirds. To share my screen, I'm going to share this. I don't think I need sound and video. Great. And then I'm going to try and make this less, let's see, let's hide that, and let's hide that. Okay, so the title of this meeting is Conversational Shorebirds, which my beloved wife has informed me is a very silly title because it's not obvious what it means. What I was going for is this idea that if you're studying a language, so when I went to, we went to Italy last year and had to learn Italian before I went, the introductory material, if you don't know a language, is very simple and very basic, and it just gives you a few key concepts and lots of repetition. So like it's conversational Italian, you're not learning everything about the Italian language, just enough to get by and have a good time. And that's the approach I'm trying to take here with shorebirds. I'm treating shorebirds as a large and difficult language to understand fully, which they are. But you can get enough to get by pretty quick. So that's what this talk is focused on, is giving you enough to get by and have a conversation with the shorebirds down at the beach. Not literally, but buongiorno in the Italian lessons. That was lesson one. All of lesson one was basically buongiorno. So I'm taking the same approach here. So you can have fun down at the beach. So lesson one is the long-billed curlew. So we're going to learn how to identify these species. This is, in fact, a long-billed curlew. And all of these photos were taken on the beach around here or near here. This is a bird we have on the beach a lot. It's very distinctive, pretty easy to identify if you know what to look for. Anyone in the room have a hint what I'm going to highlight as the most important thing to look for on the long-billed curlew?
Long bill.
A long bill, yes. It is, as its name implies, very long-billed. And that big long bill is a good indication that you could well be looking at a long-billed curlew. That long bill that curves downward. Shorebirds in general have all evolved to live in similar habitat, and they all have their own niches that they occupy ecologically. They've radiated in their foraging strategies. And one of the ways that they are distinct from each other is that they have evolved different beak shapes and sizes that allows them to feed in different ways. It's like the long-billed curlew can probe really deeply into the sand for the invertebrates that it wants to eat. And shorebirds with shorter beaks are probing the upper part of the sand. So that long down curved beak. And in general, with shorebirds, the beak is the first thing that I look at and that you probably should look at. The overall size of the bird and the length and shape of the beak. Some other things to notice about the long-billed curlew that can be important is it's got this sort of buffy coloration. And I'm not going to talk about all the plumages of the shorebirds. That's kind of, advanced shorebirds to talk about, oh, in the breeding plumage, they look like this. And in their winter plumage, they look like this. I'll mention it as we go a little bit, but I'm going to focus more on those features you can see regardless of what state of molt they are in or what time of year it is. And the size in the beak is something you always have access to. But it is worth noting this kind of buffy wash on the underparts, this sort of almost cinnamon color that the long-billed curlew has a lot of. So let's keep going. Here is a long-billed curlew in flight. And again, you can see a lot of the important features. You can get a sense of its size, like you can't in these photos, but in real life, as I said, this is a big shorebird. It's probably the size of a crow in terms of its overall body size, or at least fairly close to crow size. So it's big for a shorebird. You can see that long beak. And it has, as again, I talked about this sort of cinnamon coloring. So from the upper side, these flight feathers on the wings are very cinnamon toned. This one's actually in molt. It's replacing some of its wing feathers here. But you can still see that characteristic sort of buffy coloration. Here's one on the beach with one of their favorite things to eat, which is a sand crab. And it's got its wings raised. It just looks like it's having a great time. I don't know if it was being chased. I don't remember when I took the photo. But and you can see the underwings have this interesting feature where the wing linings, which is sort of this front part of the underwing, is again very cinnamony. It's got that distinct cinnamon color. And that's worth looking for and paying attention to because it will help you with the ID. And that's it. That's all of lesson one. You now know your long-billed curlews. You can go down to the beach, and even if you can't identify any of the other shorebirds, you should be good on the long-billed curlews because you know what to look for. All right, let's go on to lesson two. Let's make it more complicated. And lesson two, as you have probably figured out from the slide, is about the whimbrel, which looks like this. Whimbrel. Whimbrel with a M and a B, so whimbrel. Which is an odd name until you learn it, and it just seems like a name. It is also pretty big. It's a little smaller than the long-billed curlew. It's maybe midway in size between like a robin and a crow. It's big, but it's not quite as big as the long-billed curlew. It also has a long beak that curves down, so it is potentially confusable with the long-billed curlew. After the long-billed curlew, this is the longest downward curving shorebird beak you're going to see on our local beaches. So it's important not to get hung up too much on one feature. You want to look at several features, and then the ID will sort of come together for you. It is sort of overall brownish, like a lot of shorebirds are, but it is not as cinnamony. Like it doesn't have that real kind of warm cinnamon tones that the long-billed curlew has. And there's one other feature that's really useful. I'm going to keep picking on Laurel because I know she knows and she's always helpful. What else do you look for? It has head stripes. Yeah, look at its head. It has this relatively bold pattern where there's a dark line through the eye and then a light, broad light line over the eye and then a dark cap or crown. And you put that all together and it's a really dramatically stripy head. And the long-billed curlew, I'm going to back up for a second. The long-billed curlew has a little bit of that sometimes. You can see it's called, and sometimes even more than on this bird, a little bit of a dark line and then a light and then a dark crown, but it's not as boldly patterned. It doesn't really stand out the way the Whimbrel's striped head does. So that's a real good thing to look for. In flight, you can see, again, the characteristic beak shape and the stripy crown. Stripy head rather. And you can also notice if you look carefully, it does not have the cinnamon wing linings that the long-billed curlew had. And it doesn't have the cinnamon flight feathers that the long-billed curlew had. And it's not as cinnamony below as the long-billed curlew was. So these are all useful ways. When you see a big shorebird flying by and it's got that big beak that curves down, look for those cinnamon tones and that'll really help you in terms of figuring out it's long-billed curlew or is it a Whimbrel. All right, so that's lesson 2. Now we have review. All right, I like this image because it sums up the first 2 lessons really well. So who can tell me, who's willing to take a guess about what 2 birds we have on the screen? And again, because the Zoom people can't talk, I'm going to pick on the people in the room. And I've already picked on Laurel twice. And Sally, I know, might have a harder time.
See the screen.
Yeah, Sally has a tough time with that.
Yeah.
In which of the 2 birds? Are they saying they both are or one or the other?
Closer.
The closer bird is indeed a long-billed curlew, gold star, excellent. Thank you. And how about the bird that's out of focus in the back? That is the Whimbrel. Yeah, you guys are sharp. This is good.
It looks like the legs are slightly longer.
Yeah, overall, the long-billed curlew is proportionally bigger. It is a taller bird. Its legs are longer. Its neck is longer. It's just a bigger bird than the Whimbrel. It's kind of like the Whimbrel is sort of just the shrunk down version in every dimension from the long-billed curlew. But if you just see the bird by itself, that can be hard to assess sometimes, which is why it's good to note even in this out of focus bird in the back, you can see the stripy crown, you can see the shorter beak, relatively shorter beak. The buffy tones are not as evident, whether they're there or not, but they're there too on the long-billed curlew. All right, let's keep going. All right. So here's another photo of 2 shorebirds. Now the one on the right's a little more challenging. It's not giving you that nice profile view, but with some, analysis, you could probably figure out.
But you can see the cinnamon.
You can see some cinnamon on that right-hand bird, and you can see that super long beak. Yeah, the one on the right is in fact a long-billed curlew, and the one on the left again is the Whimbrel. The 2 of them were just hanging out on the beach, and the long-billed curlew was foraging for like old sand crab, detritus, and the Whimbrel wanted it, and the long-billed curlew was not having it. This is later in the same interaction, the long-billed curlew finally got fed up with that Whimbrel and chased it off. So in this photo, obviously the long-billed curlew is on the left and the Whimbrel is on the right. Okay, let's keep going.
Now what kind, if the sand crabs are deeper, what would the Whimbrel be?
So now you ask a question that goes beyond my level of expertise. Like, what is the Whimbrel eating that it's got that different adaptation? I don't know. I don't know that level of detail.
I thought you were they knew everything.
Well, that's very sweet of you, Sally, to think I knew everything.
Thinking that, John, no matter what.
I appreciate your willingness to suspend your disbelief about my lack of knowledge. Yeah. All right, we're going to keep going. Lesson 3, we got another bird coming up. Is the marbled godwit. And it looks like this. It's also really big. It's basically as big as the long-billed curlew, maybe just a teensy bit smaller, and I don't know. But it's up there. It's bigger than a Whimbrel. And what is the characteristic feature of the marbled godwit that is going to help you pick it out on the beaches?
Bill, but not downturned.
Long bill that curves up. It is recurved, is I guess one of the technical ways of describing that. It curves upwards, which is Very distinctive. On our local beaches, if you see a big shorebird with a beak that curves up like that, it's going to be a marbled godwit. 99.9. I don't think so. No, the only camera is like looking on at me from here, so they won't even know.
I'll give you a hug then.
You're welcome. You know, any expressions of affection are allowed. This is a safe space, Sally. So the marbled godwit has a beak that curves up. There are other godwits that very occasionally do show up in Santa Barbara, but I've never seen one. I'd like to see one. Hudsonian godwit maybe, or a bar-tailed godwit. But no, if you see a godwit, if you see a big shorebird with an upturned beak in Santa Barbara, it's almost certainly a marbled godwit. It looks a lot like a long-billed curlew, except its beak is wrong, right? But it has a lot of the same sort of buffy tones and kind of the same overall or similar overall pattern to a long-billed curlew.
How about flipping? This is the.
Yeah, this is still the marbled godwit. And yeah, you can see it does sort of have the cinnamon wing linings, maybe not as prominently as the long-billed curlew, but they are there.
Seems to have amazing wingspan, beautiful.
Yeah, the curlews are big, beautiful birds. And I'm not even talking about it in this talk, but they all have distinctive vocalizations too. So if you learn their calls, you can go down, walk down the beach and identify the shorebirds without even seeing them. You can just learn their calls, and they all sound different. Here's a couple of marbled godwits having some sort of aggressive interaction. And a out of focus marbled godwit in the lower right-hand corner. Like you can still tell it's a marbled godwit, even though you can barely see the bird, just because you can detect that beak. And it is sort of like pink at the base and dark at the tip is another characteristic of the marbled godwit beak. All right, review. So as I go through these, the reviews are sort of, they include all the birds you might have seen so far. Like I believe I've set this up so there will never be a bird in the review that has not been covered, but I mixed them together without rhyme or reason. So here, wait for the sirens to go by. All right, there we go. All right, so who do we think we have in this photo? I'm going to pick on the same people because, we don't have enough people here to pick on different people at a time. Laurel, what do you think we got in this picture? That is exactly right. We have a whimbrel in the front and a marbled godwit in the back. And I'm not going to tick through all the features. We've already talked about all the features. We're going to keep on going. All right. So I wanted to give you a hard time. So I have concealed the feature that would have immediately told you what bird this is. So you have to try and figure out what it is without seeing that feature. And this is not really fair, because if you were out at the beach and you saw this, you would wait 3 seconds and you would see what the bird was. Photos are great because you can really study them and you can go on the fine details and get out your calipers and you can measure the length of the feathers, but you can't see anything but that image, right? All right, well, I'm going to end the suspense and show you the same bird 2 seconds later. That bird on the left is the one that had its beak buried in the sand in this one. And it is, in fact, of course, a long-billed curlew. And the bird on the right is a whimbrel. You folks are. Yeah, shorebirds generally interact a lot because if you think about it, they're in the exact same spot. They want to be in that interface between the water and the land, and there's just one line, and they're all like in that space. So yeah, you see mixed flocks of shorebirds a lot, which can be really handy because you can kind of compare them by size. If you know what one of them is, you can see the other next to it and go, oh, it's a little smaller than that. Oh, it's a little bigger than that. All right, here's some birds in flight. And I kind of like this photo because it sort of illustrates, again, this way that they are constrained to be in this one spot right at the shore, and people like being at the shore. So these birds interact with people a lot, which, can sometimes have unfortunate consequences for the birds, but also means as a birder, they're maybe a little more willing to just hang out where you are as long as you're not, flushing them and chasing them. The mortal enemy of shorebirds on a beach are dogs and frisbees and toddlers, I think. It's just impossible for them to get any rest in the vicinity of any of those 3 things, but they need their rest. So, have your toddler, give them some space if you can manage to train your toddler any better than your dog. You don't put the toddler on a leash, but do put the dog on a leash if it's legal to have a dog on the beach. All right, we're going to move on to another one. And this is the last of the sort of big shorebirds that I'm going to talk about. These big four, like large in size, is the willet. It's the smallest of these four. It's a little smaller than these other three shorebirds we've talked about. It's got a characteristic beak, though. So it doesn't curve up, it doesn't curve down. It's just straight. It's got a very straight beak of willet length. You know, you kind of become very familiar with the length of these different beaks as you study these birds. The willet is an example of a shorebird that does change its appearance a fair amount between winter and summer. Its breeding plumage, summer plumage, is much browner and speckled, and the winter plumage is a lot grayer. This one, I can't even tell. I think this is like late basic plumage, like late winter plumage, but it looks brown because I photographed it like 20 minutes after sunrise, so the light is very warm and it looks brownish. But at noon, I think this bird would look quite gray. But again, you know, go by the structure, go by the size and the other characteristics, not so much, you know, by the plumage, unless you want to go by plumage. And as you get to more difficult shorebird IDs, plumage does become important. But for conversational, you know, shorebirds 101, we're not going to worry about it so much. Here's what I think of as a more typical winter look for a willet. But again, you can see that characteristic shape. How big is it? It's like, I can say it's sort of midway between a robin and a crow in size. You know, it's definitely smaller than those other shorebirds we've been looking at so far, but not small. I mean, it's still pretty hefty for a shorebird. And in flight, it has a very prominent field mark that you will learn to recognize, which is the black and white stripes on the wings. Again, there are other shorebirds that have that, but not really around here. So if you see a bird, big shorebird flying around here with that pattern on its wings, it is almost certainly a willet. All right, review. Here's where it gets fun. More like going to the beach. All right, so what do we have here? All right, Laurel is craning her neck. Willet, where? Willet on the right, yes. Black and white wings, dead giveaway. And how about the other two birds? Curlews, long-billed curlews. Cinnamon wing linings, big honkin' beak, not very stripy head, large size, long-billed curlews. And the downward curving beak. All right, how about this bird? Whimbrel. Yeah, your classic Whimbrel field guide photo. In profile, well lit. We're 3 stars in eBird photo guidelines. I'm very focused on the eBird photo guidelines when I'm taking my photos. All right, this is interesting. So I will just spoil the surprise. The birds on either side are willets, which you can tell from the beak, but they are in their breeding plumage. Like this is in July. So you can see they look very different from that very gray bird we were looking at before. Now they're very speckled and browny and darker. And the marbled godwit in the center is doing this really crazy thing with its beak. This is a behavior that they have, marbled godwits especially, but some of these other shorebirds as well. It is called rhynchokinesis. It's a fancy word that I'm very proud that I know. I don't know why I would be proud of that, but I'm proud. And they can basically, their beaks are prehensile. They can do that with their beak. And they do that as they are probing for stuff. They can grab stuff. They can kind of move the tip of their beak around to grab things. And you'll just the not, I mean, the last little bit of the beak, like maybe the last quarter of the beak. I mean, I don't actually know. I'm not an expert in rhynchokinesis, except I know how to pronounce it. But it is really cool. They don't have muscles in their beak, but they do have tendons. So they're using muscles in their head linked to tendons that attach to different parts of the beak, and they can manipulate their beak, which I just think is cool. Like I didn't know they could do this, and I took this photo. I was like, oh my God, what's wrong with that marbled godwit? Well, it's got showing off its rhynchokinesis. All right, here's a really tough one because this is more like the view you would get of a distant flock flying. There's not a lot of detail there. I'm not sure from your seats if you can even see enough detail. I'm going to leave the camera for a second. So we think that 6 marbled godwits. So far left is a marbled godwit. Next one over is a marbled godwit. and then 3. Sorry, I can do it this way. Then 3, and then 1 down here. And then how about this bird in the middle?
Looks like
It is, in fact, I believe, a long-billed curlew. And that just leaves 1 bird down here, which is a whimbrel, which is cool. Like these 3 different species are all flying together in a flock. So they do associate with each other. Apparently get along okay. All right, we've done with the big shorebirds. We're on to smaller shorebirds. Do we want to take a break or do we want to just power through? All right, we have a vote for power through, and I always do what Laurel says because she's got the right idea. So this is a spotted sandpiper. Unlike the long-billed curlew, it does not always do a very good job of living up to its name. So this is in its winter plumage, its basic plumage, when it is not spotted, except it's still called spotted. It is the spotted sandpiper, and it's pretty small. This bird is like, what's a more familiar bird that it's sort of like a California towhee if it had a short tail or no tail. Yeah, it's about the size of a towhee, a little smaller than a scrub jay. Again, minus the tail. It has a characteristic feature that does not show up well in photos, and I will not demonstrate it because it would be embarrassing. But what it does is it bobs its tail up and down. So if you see a little shorebird about this size, not the tiniest of shorebirds, but a little bigger than that, walking along the edge of the water, and its back end is just going up and down like a lot, dramatically. That is probably a spotted sandpiper. There are other shorebirds that do a version of it, but not to the extent that the spotted sandpiper does. Here is a spotted sandpiper in its breeding plumage. This was in August, and you can see it is in fact spotted. Just during half the year is when it is spotted. And it was probably bobbing its tail, but you couldn't tell from this still photo. And this is a really horrible photo, a 1-star photo for sure, of a spotted sandpiper in flight. But I included it both so you could kind of see the wing pattern, kind of learn what to look for in a spotted sandpiper flying. But another thing that doesn't show up so much in a still photo is its characteristic flight style. So they hold their wings stiffly downward when they're gliding, which is what this bird is doing in the photo. And they kind of have this, like, it's hard to describe. Like, again, their wings never really seem to get above level. They have this kind of rapid wing beat with the wings held downward. And when you learn to recognize it, you will spot it from a distance and go, oh, that looks like a spotted sandpiper. And you would be right, because that's what they do. All right, review. Review is the most fun. It's like going birding. Yeah, we can just.
I need to stand up a lot, so this is
right.
good. Thank you, though.
All right, so very artsy photo of a willet. Yes, it is a willet. Straight beak, medium length, gray. It's a basic plumage willet. How about this? You can't really tell the size. This is a smallish bird. This is, like bigger than a sparrow, but the spotted sandpiper. Yeah. This kind of eye line, it sort of has like a dark eye line and then a broken light eye ring, a little bit of a white eyebrow above the eye. That's all. Those are all like spotted sandpiper things. And again, characteristic beak size and shape. Just, stare at that beak enough times, and then when you're out there looking at birds, you see that a shorebird with that beak of the right size, you should be thinking spotted sandpiper, because we have a lot of them around here. They're one of our more common, smaller sandpipers. All right. This one should be easy, if you can remember. That's the thing, is with these language lessons, like, it is a godwit, it is a marbled godwit. I found with like learning the Italian, like, yeah, it was easy in the lesson, but then 3 or 4 lessons in, it's like, oh, wow, there's a lot to remember here. That's why you should start learning Italian earlier than like 2 weeks before your first trip to Italy. I now realize. I mean, I couldn't be bothered at then, but all right, we're on to a new lesson. Plovers. We're going to talk about 2 big plovers. Plovers are a whole other group of shorebirds. And probably the most familiar of the larger plovers around here is this bird. Plovers are cool. This is a killdeer. Did I already say that? Was there a slide? Oh, I just said two big plovers. Didn't say what it was. It's a killdeer. This is a killdeer. And this is indeed a killdeer. And those two prominent black bands, like the black neck band and then the black breast band below it, that's a very good indication you're looking at a killdeer. And I think for most, for a lot of birders, that's as far as they ever go in terms of learning killdeer characteristics, because it's so easy. It's like, oh, it's got the two bands, it's a killdeer. Plovers have big eyes for shorebirds. If you notice, it's sort of like an anime cartoon character look this bird has. They have those big eyes because they hunt visually, like those, fancy shorebirds with their rhynchokinesis that are probing down in the sand. They're hunting by feel mostly. They're using their very sensitive beak tip to go find things and grab them. Plovers hunt by sight, and they have a characteristic behavior when they're foraging where they will run and stop and run and stop. And what they're doing is when they're stopping, they're looking. And then they're running to a new spot to either grab something or look for some more. But they have this run and stop, run and stop. So if you see a shorebird that's doing that, think plover. And if you see a killdeer, watch it and you'll see it doing that because they do it all the time.
Do killdeer do you see them sometimes on the land too?
Yeah, killdeers are not as shore dependent as other shorebirds.
We used to have some before they started planting berries on the parsons, on the road up to our house.
At your ranch, like inland a little bit, yeah. Yeah.
And all of you've been to Green Tree Farm, so you know where I'm talking about. And I love the sound of killdeers. And
Yeah.
It was so fun to hear them.
Yeah.
For years, and then.
Yeah, very distinctive vocalizations.
Planting. Mrs. Parsons died. She wouldn't, before she died, she wouldn't let any of that land be planted. It was wonderful.
Yeah, killdeers are, they like ag fields, they like golf courses. Yeah, they're shorebirds you can see even if you don't have a shore nearby. And here's another shorebird that is more shore dependent. It's about the size of a killdeer. This is the black-bellied plover. It's sort of similar to the spotted sandpiper in that during the winter plumage, it doesn't look like its name at all. It does not have a black belly except in the breeding season. When it looks like this, or this one's sort of in between, but it has a black belly in the breeding season. So that is a black-bellied plover. You'll notice that like the killdeer, it has this plover-shaped beak. So a plover has a beak that's kind of shortish for a shorebird and sort of swells a little bit in the outer half. I'm not sure if there's a term for that, but it's what plover beaks look like. Relatively big eyes still for a shorebird. This one's not quite like the killdeer with its big bug eye, but still pretty big. And it runs and stops like other plovers. Here's a black-bellied plover in flight. And this is a cool feature. They have like black wing pits. Their axillary feathers are black. And when they're flying by and you see that, it's a good sign you're looking at a black-bellied plover. There are some other plovers we have occasionally on our beaches here, the Pacific golden plover, for example, that look quite similar to a black-bellied plover, but they do not have the black wing pits. So if you see what you think is a black-bellied plover flying by, but it doesn't have black wing pits, it could be a Pacific golden plover, which is beyond the scope of conversational shorebirds. So pretend I said none of that, and let's keep going. Review. All right, we've got two different plovers in this photo from Ocean Beach County Park. I didn't mention it in the announcements, but if you're an avid birder and you like to go to Ocean Beach County Park, the annual beach closure there ends tomorrow. They're going to be opening it up. So I'm not sure about tomorrow, but as of Saturday, you should be able to actually bird the whole beach there. They close it for the snowy plover nesting and least tern nesting.
Where is that they close it?
Ocean Beach County Park. It's out west of Lompoc.
Oh, okay. Yes,
Take Ocean Boulevard, I think it's called, or Ocean Avenue, go all the way out. But you have to check for Vandenberg launches too, because they close down when they're launching SpaceX rockets from Vandenberg.
And how about around just north of Isla Vista? Don't they, in that area, don't they have snowy plover.
They do, yeah, Coal Oil Point and the Sands Beach north of there. Yeah, they have an extensive snowy plover nesting program there with docents and roped off areas. I think that stays roped off year round.
Oh,
But you can access the beach, between the ropes and the water. At Ocean Beach County Park, you can't even get to the beach during the closure time, at least not at the park.
and are there still some nesting, at our state park?
There were some nesting attempts this year, and I want to say at least a couple of successes. A couple of snowy plovers nested successfully on the beach, were fledged off the beach this year at Carpinteria. But I don't know exactly because I left. I went traveling and wasn't able to keep tabs all the way through. I'll research that. I'll try and get you an answer by the next time I see you.
That's okay, I just remember when they were
Yeah,
going, well, with your group.
yeah, and they are still doing that. They nested there this year. So you're stalling because it's quiz time. You're supposed to do your quiz. It is a killdeer in the foreground, and the one in the back,
Yeah.
black-bellied plover. Yeah. All right. This isn't a plover at all. So Wimble, okay, how about the fuzzy bird behind it? We're getting to more challenging IDs now. Challenging to even see this bird, but I think it's a willet. Yeah. You can see enough of it to see that willet shape. Right? How about this bird?
You go through this.
You are experts. It is indeed a long-billed curlew. Oh, we just got started. No, there are 10 lessons, by the way. So we are 7/10 of the way through. And then I have a little bonus section at the end.
Yeah.
It is, in fact, a memory challenge. It's a lot to do in one meeting. And this happened with the gulls talk, too. I tried to make this sort of very gentle introduction for the gull talk. And it was gentle until it like is being beaten up by feathers. It's like there's so many of them. It's like gentle, but it's too much. All right, well, we're just going to zip through these then. We won't have as much putting on the spot. Two little plovers. We had two big plovers, the killdeer and the black-bellied plover. Now we're going to talk about two little plovers. Aren't they cute? It's so cute. Yeah, they're adorable. They're adorable little birds. Tom and Laurel just came back from Massachusetts where you saw hundreds of these on the beach. You saw piping plovers, which this is not, but you also saw this, which is a semi-palmated plover. So it's kind of like the fun-sized candy bar version of the killdeer. It's just like the killdeer, but shrunk down. These are quite small. These are like, little tiny shorebird sized. They're the size of like a big sparrow, maybe. But it has the plover beak, a little bit of a fleshy base to the beak, which is helpful. A single black band that is complete. Like the black band goes all the way around the front, almost all the time. Once in a while, there's a little break, but almost always has a black band going all the way around the front. And it's fairly dark brown on top. Okay? The specific shade of the top of the bird is helpful in distinguishing it from the next little plover we're going to talk about, which is this plover, which is, arguably my favorite bird, one of my favorite birds. I said a different bird was my favorite bird last time. We won't tell the snowy plovers. This is a snowy plover that we were just talking about that have been nesting on the beach in Carpinteria the last several years. They are very cute. How could you not, adorable is the technical term for the characteristic of these little plovers. They are adorable.
Just what I was thinking.
It's just so I've been.
Yeah, I'm not even going to show you a picture of a snowy plover baby because you wouldn't let me go on to the next slide after that. They're just so cute. So it's a lot like the semi-palmated plover. It doesn't have the fleshy beak. The beak's a little longer than the semi-palmated, right? A little sharper, pointier beak. It's lighter on top, so it blends in with the sand. Snowy plovers just live in sand. Like semi-palmated plovers, I think, hang out in mud more, so they blend in with the mud. But snowy plovers, just sand, so they are sand colored. They have a black band, but it is incomplete, right? It doesn't go all the way around the front of the bird. And if you fall in love with them and you docent for the heroic snowy plovers trying to breed on a beach in Carpinteria with 5,000 campers right next to them, you learn to recognize this is a male snowy plover. And the females are a little drabber, but still adorable. All right, we're going to move on. Review. All right, this was fun. This is at Carpinteria State Beach. These are breeding snowy plovers. And there was a breeding pair of killdeers in the same stretch of beach and their eggs had hatched. And so the little chicks were running around on the beach, being adorable and tiny. And so the adults were defending their chicks. And when the chicks went to the same place, the adults were defending against each other. And it was just a wild scene for a few minutes there. These are 3 snowy plovers on the left and a killdeer on the right. And they're all trying to intimidate the other because their chicks are nearby. But it all ended happily. No chicks were harmed during this fracas.
That's a great picture.
Yeah, I like this picture too. I like action photos.
Yeah.
Oh, I will show you some adorable chicks. So one of the things that's adorable about baby plovers is they nestle under their parents, right? They're precocial. That is, when they're born, the chicks start running around right away and they feed themselves. And when they are scared or in trouble, they hide under the parents' wings. They go and they tuck under their parents. And snowy plovers do this and killdeers do this. So there are, in fact, there's I think either 1 or 2 killdeers underneath that. I think there are 2 killdeer chicks underneath that killdeer's wings, and the 3rd chick is looking for a chance to get in there too. Actually, I think there were just 2 chicks. This was at Lake Jocelyn this year, and I think they only had 2 chicks when I was there. Yes, right up by your farm, Sal. All right, we're really getting there. We're almost to the end. Talk about another bird. Actually, this is a bigger shorebird. This is the greater and lesser yellowlegs. I shoved 2 species together for reasons that will become apparent. So this is a greater yellowlegs. And unlike some of these other shorebirds named after body parts, it really does have yellow legs all the time. Yeah, it's very helpful. If you can see its legs and they're bright yellow, there's a good chance it's a yellowlegs. Yeah. Again, the length and shape of the beak is really helpful because in a second, I'm going to show you the lesser yellowlegs, which is very similar. It's basically a greater yellowlegs, except it's a little bit smaller. But its beak is proportionally shorter. You don't see a lot of lesser yellowlegs around here, so I'm not going to really dwell on it, but it's kind of a fun challenge as you're working on your, shorebird ID skills. If you can find a lesser yellowlegs, for a long time I was trying to find a lesser yellowlegs, and I kept trying to turn a greater yellowlegs into a lesser yellowlegs, going, oh, that beak's a little shorter, right? No, it wasn't. It was a greater yellowlegs. When I finally saw the lesser yellowlegs, I was like, oh yeah, that beak is significantly shorter, right? Because here's wait, we're going forward and go back. So again, look at that greater yellowlegs beak. It almost curves up just a tiny bit, not as much as a marbled godwit, but a little bit.
Well, definitely long.
But it's definitely longer, yeah. And the lesser yellowlegs beak does not curve up at all. So if you're trying to talk yourself into a yellowlegs being a lesser, but there's even a hint of a beak curving up, it's probably a greater. All right, review. All right. This is at Lake Jocelyn again. I've got a lot of Lake Jocelyn pictures here. It's a very good spot for yellowlegs. Okay, so I will give you a hint. At lower left, that is a greater yellowlegs. So that gives you a sense of scale for what that bird in the upper right might be. And another hint is that if this was video, its tail would be going up and down and up and down and up and down and up and down. Because it is in fact a spotted sandpiper. All right. Another 1-star photo. So there is a non-shorebird in this photo. There is a mallard duck over on the left side. It was foggy, but as previously described, I really wanted to see a lesser yellowlegs, so I was willing to take this. This is a greater yellowlegs on the right of the picture and a lesser yellowlegs in the center. And you can kind of compare their sizes and see it's just a little smaller. I mean, noticeably smaller.
Yeah.
If they're standing next to each other, it's great. If they're not standing next to each other, it's harder. Thank you, Sal. I appreciate that. Okay, here's a fun comparison photo. And this is getting tricky because I have hidden some of the useful field marks from you. There's a willet coming in for a landing, and behind it, or beyond it rather, You can't trick Laurel. Laurel has seen a bird or two in her day. That is, in fact, a greater yellowlegs who is bathing and hiding its yellow legs, which is why it's good to look at the birds and not look at the whole bird, not just the one characteristic feature, because maybe you won't see the characteristic feature and you still want to identify the bird. That is a greater yellow legs. Thought this was neat. This was sunset at Lake Jocelyn. It had sort of a pretty golden color on the water. These are two greater yellow legs hanging out together. The one on the right is hard to tell, except you can kind of see it's the same size as the bird on the left. These are both greater yellow legses. That be the plural? Yellow legses? Two greater yellow legs. That's probably more grammatical. All right, only 2 lessons to go. Lesson 9, the long-billed / short-billed dowitcher. And I'm going to give you, because you've been so good, we aren't even going to talk about the differences between the long-billed and the short-billed dowitcher. For the purposes of this meeting, this conversational shorebirds approach, you can think of them all as just dowitchers. And this also reflects the fact that I'm really bad at dowitcher identification. Expert birders can tell you, oh, you're a long-billed dowitcher, oh, short-billed dowitcher. I'm not that good. This is a dowitcher. I can say that with confidence. Really long beak for its size. It's they're kind of medium-sized. I want to say they're like a little bigger than a killdeer, maybe sort of, robin-sized, maybe a little bigger, like a fat robin, bigger, but with a really long beak. And they have a characteristic feeding behavior where they act like a sewing machine. Yeah, I've heard it said, or like a pump jack, like those oil drilling rigs that go up and down and up and down and up and down. Dowitchers will go up and down and up and down and up and down. They'll walk through the water and they're using that long beak to probe down into the mud under the water. Here are 2 dowitchers sort of illustrating that process as best I can in a still photo. Dowitcher ID, as I say, is tricky. You really want to get to where you understand the plumages because its fine plumage details are helpful. The vocalizations are helpful, but I said I wasn't going to talk about how to distinguish them, so I'm not. Those are dowitchers, though. These are dowitchers. These are dowitchers in flight, and they have this cool feature, this white stripe up their back when they're flying. Again, there are a few other shorebirds that have that, but not so much around here. If you see that feature on a medium-sized shorebird, it's probably a dowitcher around here. All right, review. What do we think we have here? These are both birds you know, or, have been exposed to. If I introduced you, if I took you to a work party and introduced you to 50 of my work friends and then quizzed you on who they were afterwards, I would be totally lost.
Yeah.
This is a dowitcher on the right. That is an excellent call. Yes. And the bird on the left,
Yes.
it is a yellow legs. And it is, in fact, a greater yellow legs. Or is it? Or is it a lesser yellow legs?
Yeah.
I think maybe the lesser yellow legs is smaller than a dowitcher. And that's why I thought this was a lesser yellow legs. I forget. I apologize. I inflicted this slide on you without doing my own homework. We're going to move on. But if you pester me after the meeting, I will go find this photo. August. This was just this month. Last month. This was recently I took this photo. I can't remember. There was some lesser yellow legs hanging out at Lake Jocelyn, but there were also greater yellow legs hanging out there. I think this is a lesser yellow legs. I'm going to claim it's a lesser yellow legs because of the relative size versus the dowitcher. I think a greater yellow legs would look more like the same size as the dowitcher, or even a little longer. If you don't hear an embarrassed admission that I was wrong, it means I was right. Right, how about these cool birds down at the beach? So, hint for getting fun bird photos. These are willets. This is a flock of willets. Go to the beach right before sunrise. Lie down on the sand or get very low. You want to be at bird eye level. Wait for the sun to come up and then take your photo. All right. Yeah, I didn't really show you this plumage, so you'd be forgiven for going, I haven't seen this bird before. No, you haven't seen this version of this bird before. This is, in fact, another dowitcher.
Yellow and.
Yeah, the dowitcher's legs are kind of yellow. They're sort of a greenish yellow, like a dull greenish yellow, not like the bright yellow of the yellow legs. But yes, they do have yellowish legs.
In like this, with this plumage, it still has that white stripe.
Yeah. Yeah, in all plumages, it will have that white stripe visible when it's flying. Okay. Sally, can you see it well enough?
I can't remember anyway,
Ah.
but I'm sure enjoying this.
They're beautiful to look at. You don't have to identify every bird. You can just go enjoy the appearance of the bird.
Ah,
This is, in fact, a willet.
yeah.
Okay. It's a willet. Yeah. All right. Another cool looking bird. Greater yellow legs. Slightly upturned beak, just ever so slightly upturned beak, relatively long, like it's longer than the width of the head, noticeably longer than the head is wide. That's a greater yellow legs look, and bright yellow legs. Okay, we have last lesson. Peeps. We're going to lump all the peeps, all the little tiny birds, little tiny shorebirds. I'm including sanderlings in with the peeps, even though some authorities will tell you, well, a sanderling isn't a peep. It's significantly larger than a peep. Well, yeah, but they're all pretty small. And we're going to go fast because you've been very patient. This is, in fact, a sanderling. And it is exhibiting its characteristic sanderling behavior. If you see a flock of little shorebirds, they're not the tiniest of tiny, but they're just a little bit bigger. But you see a flock of them, they look like this. They have that beak. They're very pale with maybe a little black along the leading edge of the wing. They have dark black legs, and they run up and down with the waves. The whole flock. The wave goes out and they all run down to the edge of the water. The wave goes in, they all run back up to the top of the water. That is a sanderling behavior. Other shorebirds will do a version of that sometimes, but sanderlings specialize in it. That's like their thing. Here's a whole group of sanderlings doing that. You know, 3 seconds after this photo was taken, that wave came in and they all ran up the beach. These are sanderlings, and I included this photo because the bird on the far right shows you their breeding plumage. And we do sometimes, you know, at the right time of year, this is May, you know, this one bird was in its breeding plumage and the others were more, had molted more into their, closer to their winter plumage. Sanderlings do change their appearance pretty dramatically between their breeding plumage and their winter plumage. But same shape, same size, same beak, same running up and down. And one last view of a sanderling. All right, this is a different peep. Again, these are tiny little shorebirds, very small. These are Western sandpipers. We have, if you exclude the sanderlings and you exclude the little plovers, which hopefully you can recognize as their own separate things now, the remainder are almost all two species. We have Western sandpipers, which is what these are, and we have least sandpipers, which look very similar, but just a tiny bit smaller. But they're really cool, and the beaks are a little different. But the really cool feature, that if you can see it well, is the leg color. The Western sandpipers have black legs, right? The least sandpipers, which is what these are, have yellow legs, sort of a dull yellow, not like a bright yellow legs, but definitely yellow. But when they're foraging in mud, those legs will get coated with mud, so you can be fooled. The beak shape is helpful. This is a least sandpiper beak. It's kind of a sharp, pointy little beak. Like it starts off thicker and then it gets thinner. And the way I remember this is it looks like if a least sandpiper came up and pecked you on the arm, it would be kind of painful, like it would hurt. But the Western sandpiper, which we were just looking at, has more of a blunt-tipped beak. It wouldn't hurt as much if it pecked you, is my way of visualizing it. Not that either of these birds would ever think of pecking you. They're very well behaved. They're not interested in pecking you. The Western sandpiper beak can also be longer and droopier. This one on the right really has that going on. One on the left, not as much. And in fact, there is a fair amount of range of, you can have Western sandpipers with relatively short beaks and Western sandpipers with relatively long beaks, all within, a certain range for Western sandpipers. All right, these are least sandpipers. And review, okay. I'll give you a hint. These are peep-sized. They're little bitty sandpipers. Laurel, what do you think? She thinks they're Western. I think Laurel is right because they've got black legs. And they have some other features that are sort of Western-y, but we didn't really talk about it, so we won't really talk about it. How about this bird? This is a review, so we're including lots of stuff. This is sort of medium-sized. Dowitcher. Yeah, this is a big long beak. This is a dowitcher. And these birds in flight, little tiny peep-sized birds, they are in fact Western sandpipers. Identifying peeps in flight is challenging for me, but if you got a photo and you can zoom in, you can kind of see the characteristic leg color, and that sort of facial pattern is a Western sandpiper thing in certain plumages, sort of the reddish ear patch and then reddish crown. Right, 2 species here. We're just going to go fast because we're there. The one on the left is a black-bellied plover. The one on the right, you think it's a Western? I think you're wrong. It's a sanderling. I have frequently mistaken sanderlings for Western sandpipers and vice versa, but I think in this case that is a sanderling. It's a little too pale for a Western sandpiper. And, you know, I don't know. Go look at, 10,000 of these birds and you start to just kind of recognize them, and it's not really fair to say, oh, well, it's this or it's that, because you sound like, well, yeah, you just made that up. It's like, no, I just recognized it. Okay, this is fun. We got cute semi-palmated plovers, but mixed in the back, we've got some sanderlings. So you can kind of see you can't really see well, but you can kind of see the sanderlings are just a little bigger, maybe. Sanderlings have black legs. Semi-palms have yellowish legs. I don't know. This is just so adorable. This is a juvenile snowy plover that was just released from the captive rearing program at the Santa Barbara Zoo. So when the snowy plover nests are, like in danger, they get abandoned or they get destroyed, or, sometimes they will get a hold of snowy plover eggs. And because they're, a threatened species and there's this active recovery program, they will take those eggs that they know are not going to make it, and they will take them to the rearing program at the Santa Barbara Zoo, and they will rear them. They will have them grow up, and they will band them so they can identify them later, and then they'll release them. So there's a period, this is July of this year, there's a period of a few months when the releases are happening, and suddenly you've got these cute little, juvenile snowy plovers. This is not quite a baby, but this is a first-year bird, and there's some details of the plumage that kind of tell you that. But it's also got these fresh leg bands, and you can photograph the leg bands, and you can report them, and they're very kind and say, oh, I thank you for this, information, because they keep track of where they show up. This is a cute little local snowy plover. Do we recognize these birds? Excuse me. They are in fact sanderlings. It's a little bit unfair because you can't really get a sense of scale. When you're seeing in a photo like this, when you're out there at the beach, you can tell how big they are, but these are sanderlings. These, I want to say, are Western sandpipers. And because it's late and we all want to go home, I'm not even going to talk about why I think that, but that's what these are. Cumulative review. So there's one last. These are all the birds mixed together, and we're just going to go fast. It's a willet. It's a willet eating a sand crab. Sure, the sand crabs in the audience feel this is a cruel, cruel slide showing the death of this poor sand crab. Maybe the willet let it go. I don't know. Can't tell from a photo.
Catch and release.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of catch and release in the bird world. This is in fact a dowitcher. It's I don't know, dowitcher hanging out at the beach. Got that long dowitcher beak. Another adorable little plover with its leg bands. This one is you read the band colors left leg to right, top to bottom. So this is aqua over pink, blue over violet. So I think this is APBV is how you would report this bird. AP:BV. And half the time I get those band colors wrong and they write back and go, oh, thank you. By the way, that's APB. All right, here's another challenging one for the experts in the room. So it's a bunch of sanderlings and then a big shorebird with some buffy going on, right? But beak is completely invisible. Long-billed curlew would be an excellent guess. And then the bird would pull its beak up and you'd go, oh, sorry. He was a marbled godwit all the time. That was not fair. I did that just to be mean. Dowitchers. Bunch of dowitchers doing dowitcher things, probing with their beaks. Greater yellowlegs. Again, I'm kind of I put all these mean ones at the end. It's a yellow legs, but you can't see the yellow legs. So you kind of have to know everything else about it to recognize it.
When you're out there, you say, no, there's a reason I'm so confused, right?
Sanderling on the left, two snowy plovers and a turban shell on the right. Will it? Will it or won't it? It's a will it. Snazzy looking Wimbrel. That was this month. That was like a week ago. Yeah, a bunch of willets. And I think two long-billed curlews. Or three. There's a long-billed curlew at the top behind that willet. Right? Just see enough of its beak to go, it's long-billed curlew. Okay, so there was one more thing. It's not a lesson. You don't have to know it. But I felt bad because I put all this time on all these shorebirds. But in fact, there's a lot more shorebirds out there that we could see locally. So I just threw individual slides of a bunch more that you might see. Just so if you see this, you'll go, oh, wait, I've seen that bird. Black turnstones. Got a characteristic turnstone-shaped beak for turning stones. They probe in rocks and stuff, and they turn stones over looking for stuff under them. It's a black turnstone in flight. They look kind of drab, you know, when they're at rest, but when they fly, they've got this really cool kind of bold black and white pattern. Non-shorebird on the right. Snowy egret. Yeah. Recognizing out of focus birds is a skill. You know, you look at enough of these photos. Like when I upload these photos to eBird, I try and label all the birds that are in the photo because it's a thing that you do in eBird. Say, well, it's a photo of a black turnstone, but there's also a snowy plover. I mean, excuse me, a snowy egret in it. So I've spent a lot of time trying to identify fuzzy birds. Phalaropes are another, they are technically shorebirds. I spent a long time not even realizing that phalaropes were shorebirds until I started paying more attention to my field guide. They swim around in circles. They kind of waft stuff up in the water and they daintily pick off the food that they've wafted up by their swimming in circles. But this is a, I've forgotten what it is. It's a red-necked phalarope. This is a red-necked phalarope. Yeah, relatively dark upper parts. Doesn't matter. We're not doing phalaropes. This was at Kim's Market Pond. So if the Carpinteria Christmas count is coming up, if you want to participate, we'd love to have you. It's a lot more fun than looking at too many shorebird slides because I inflict them on you because I can't help myself. But one of the really cool places we always check out on the Christmas count is the Kim's Market Pond. It's a little pond, like this concrete pond about the size of this room. But it gets interesting birds in it, like this, which is a Wilson snipe. If you've ever heard of a snipe hunt, this is what they're hunting in the snipe hunt. It's a Wilson snipe. This is a cool shorebird. So that's a sanderling on the left and a dunlin on the right. It's a very cool beak that's like a little bit droopy. It's like it wants to be a curlew when it grows up, but that's as big as it's ever going to get. And surfbird. My brain is definitely gone. We've gone on too long because I'm like, what is that? That's a surfbird. I should know that that's a surfbird. You see them in the surf. You see them on the rocks down by the beach.
How big are they?
Surfbirds are like, they're like dowitcher size, except they don't have a dowitcher beak. They're like sort of when I think of as medium-sized shorebirds, they're not little tiny like peeps. They're not real, they're sort of killdeer sized,
Okay.
that medium size.
Yeah.
This is really cool. This is another bird from your pond, Sally, right next to your ranch. This is a solitary sandpiper. which looks a lot like yellow legs, except its legs are not as yellow. And it has this sort of spectacle on its eyes. Looks a lot like a spotted sandpiper too. It's kind of like cross between a spotted sandpiper and a lesser yellow legs almost, but they're very cool. And that's it. You've seen all the birds. We are done. Thank you very much. I'll stop sharing. The next time I do one of these sort of language lessons, there's going to be fewer slides. I'm going to make myself make fewer slides. It was fun. It was fun for me. Hopefully it was fun for people in Zoom. Has there been any chat? I don't see anything in the chat. So I think the people in Zoom have all been like, you know, dual screening. They've been like looking at their phones and doing other things. No, they've been looking at the shorebirds because shorebirds are fun. Okay, well, that's the meeting. Thank you, everybody. I see a thumbs up from Mary. Thank you, Mary. There's Frida Kahlo in the background. Yeah, excellent. So thank you, everybody, for coming and participating. If you're around on Saturday morning at 8 o'clock, meet me at the Carpinteria Salt Marsh, and we will go look at real birds.